It's hard to believe, but we're already finishing our third full week of class and entering into that fourth week. I wanted to do a quick week 3 part 2 recap to go over some of the ideas that you shared and to clarify a couple things. The first thing I want to go over is interactive writing. We had a Padlet board, and on this Padlet board you were giving me lots of information about interactive writing. And here's some of the things that you came up with. First of all, sharing the pen with your students and collaborating with writing is interactive writing. And the reason we do this is so children can develop beginning writing skills, or we can move their writing along to a new level that they're not quite ready for independently. Here's some questions that you had about interactive writing and the answers to them. First, is interactive writing time-consuming? And it really isn't a time-consuming kind of activity in your classroom, but it is one that you're going to need to watch for two purposes. First of all, you want to make sure it's part of a lesson where you're having that teacher demonstration and then student collaboration time. And you want to set aside purposeful, meaningful time for that. Typically, an interactive writing lesson can be 5 minutes for something short like a morning message, or if you're going to use it during your writing time, it might be a 20-minute lesson or a 30-minute lesson. Here's the problem though with interactive writing. This is the one kind of disclaimer I have to give you. If you have your students sit on the carpet or sit at their seats during interactive writing, and you have each child in your classroom share something that you need to write down, it is going to turn into a disaster very quickly. Okay. Children receive benefits from this activity where they're working together, but what happens is if it takes too long, if everyone gets a turn every time, it is tedious and it is time consuming, and what happens to our students is they disengage. They go somewhere in their head, they go somewhere in their desk, but they are not going to be with you and they're not going to be receiving the benefits. So the actual time where they're sitting and interacting with you as you write interactively, you really need to monitor. Okay, look for those wiggles, look for the eyes turning away. And so you'll learn with your classroom how long they can sit for interactive writing. For kindergarten or pre-K, it might be 5 minutes. For first grade, second grade, you might be able to get 15, maybe even 20. But you have to know your learners. And what you want to do is not everyone's going to share every time. You might want them to work in small groups to help you write interactively or compare. But it's something you have to monitor as the teacher. And it is definitely valuable time. It's not time that it would be wasted as long as you're keeping them engaged. The second question was kind of a collaboration of a couple students, and you wanted to know, what do you do with shy, passive, or learning disabled students? Because this is an activity where you want participation. So for your shy or your passive student, you have a couple options. First of all, they might not always participate in interactive writing, but as long as they're a part of the lesson and they're watching, then they are gaining the benefits. And so when we talk about emergent literacy, those skills will emerge by watching their classmates participate. And eventually, as the year goes on, you'll see that this activity becomes a normal routine in your classroom. Writing you don't do it once and then stop. It's something you'll do often, several times a week. So the more that you do it, even your shy and passive students will begin to open up to the activity. The other thing for either your shy, your passive, or your learning disabled student, and the other population I didn't mention, but your English language learners, these are the groups that will benefit most from this activity because they can really watch and learn, but sometimes it's best to take this interactive writing and not do it as a whole group activity. You might pull aside students and do small groups, and many times your shy or your passive student will participate in a small group where they wouldn't participate in a large group. And your learning disabled students or your English language learners are able to better participate in a small group that will meet their needs better. That's another way that we can differentiate for this activity, is by having small groups and write interactively at the level that they need the skill work on, and not just the not just that whole group blanket activity. So that's definitely a way that you can target all those learners. Now, typically, the next question wanted to know what ages benefit from this strategy. And typically, we use this for our emergent learners, so anywhere from pre-K through first grade at some point, because part of interactive writing is modeling those skills that are going to follow in their independent writing, and many of them won't be independent writers yet. And it's an activity where you will do more of at the start of a school year, and then especially if you're in first grade, you'll start to wean away. But it's always a great place to model and do that I do, we do component of the lesson. Now, if you have older students, let's say second to third or fourth grade, you can use this strategy in your classroom, but you won't use it for the same purpose. You'll be maybe modeling how to answer questions specifically or how to cite information. It's always going to be that time where you're going to be modeling or demonstrating, and they'll be working with you to try it out before you send them back to do something independent. Now, with our younger learners, some of you talked about working with 2- and 3-year-olds. So some ways that you can do interactive writing with 2- and 3-year-olds would be keeping it very simple and very short. A 2- and 3-year-old can definitely share with you their favorite page in a book, or they might say, what did you play with on the playground today? And you might want to integrate, you might even want to keep it 1- or 2-word answers, and you might want to have them do a drawing beside your writing. So that might be how they're working. Now, definitely with your 3-year-olds, as soon as they're learning letters, you can start writing things on chart paper or on the smartboard and have them write interactively in that way. So you might say, today we're going to write the letters of the alphabet, or today we're going to spell the word the. And you might have on our smartboard or on the chart paper dotted lines where you want them to write over top if they can't write on their own. So any way that you're going to have them up and participating, filling in letters, sometimes even for interactive writing with young learners, I don't have them write, but I have them come up and circle. So we might read a sentence, or I might write something and then have them find things, almost like a little scavenger hunt, but they're still participating and working with words and reading and writing. The other way that I sometimes will differentiate with my younger learners is you might do interactive writing, definitely not in a whole group, but in that dramatic play center or in that construction center. And let's say you're brainstorming together and you're helping each other write a sign or write a grocery list, or the things that we talked about, those authentic reading and writing activities. You can have them help you write in those dramatic play centers. And you might be getting scribble writing, but again, it's interactive and you're showing them purposeful, meaningful ways to use written language. The last question I had from you was, how do you assess interactive writing? And I guess what I would ask you to think about is, why do you need to assess it? So my guess is you're writing a lesson plan and you need to have something under the area of assessment. But truly, interactive is a small part of a bigger lesson. So usually we'll do an interactive piece and then piggyback on sending them to do something related. It's not always the case, but I can think of many lessons for writing where I would work with my boys and girls and we would write interactively, and then I would send them back to draw a picture and write something independently related to what we had just done. In that case, you would assess whatever the product is that you sent them back to do independently and not really assess the interactive writing so much. Interactive writing is more an instructional strategy than an activity. And activities are typically what we want the assessment related to. Now, here is the only other option for assessment. During interactive writing time, you may want to keep sticky notes or something close by, and you might want to jot down observational notes for specific children or all the children, how many are participating, how many were able to do what you wanted them to do interactively. And you might just jot down some anecdotal notes from your observations and keep those in a file, and we'll talk more about that as the semester goes on. But true assessment would probably not follow most of your interactive writing activities, because again, it's the strategy you're using to model for them and have them participate with you, and you would have to be real specific in if you wanted to match an objective with taking those anecdotal notes or observations from that. Below our little stars there, right here, I have an excellent link of information on interactive writing. So if you might not be 100% clear, or you want to see some specific examples for different ages, this is a link to readingrockets.org, /article/interactive-writing. And it's a great resource for you. I'm going to try to also remember put that in the D2L folder. Okay, moving from interactive writing to authentic reading and writing, and this is where we're connecting reading and writing, or we're doing reading and writing in ways that model what happens in the real world. And I had lots of different examples, from blogging to piggybacking off of an art project, or having pen pals. But what we want is we want to remember, when it comes to emergent writers, they're not proficient in most cases. So we're talking still about those young preschoolers or kindergartners in the emergent stages. So when we think of our authentic reading and writing activities, we have to make them developmentally appropriate. Some of you had great ideas for connecting reading and writing in authentic ways, but they weren't for emergent writers. They were for proficient writers. So just kind of keep that in perspective. But some of my favorites that you have shared on the Padlet board this week were using, either in the Dramatic Play Center or at home, having the students help plan a menu or write an ingredient list. Also writing labels or directions, and reading labels and directions. Writing grocery lists, writing family notes, doing labeled drawings. So what that means is if they do a drawing, write something underneath it to share. And last would be when you have labeled around the classroom or around a house for their families at home, having them read those labels. So those are just some great authentic reading and writing activities. Really, the possibilities are endless, but these are some activities that are developmentally appropriate for those emerging writers, the students that aren't accurate and proficient at writing on their own. All right, the only other thing I want to talk to you about is just kind of a heads up. For week 4, part 1, I'm going to be introducing lesson plan 1, and this is where you're going to be writing a complete lesson plan based on the HACC format for emergent or early literacy. And on the handout that you will see in the presentation, it will ask you to choose a topic, and there are 2 lists on the paper, but one is for lesson plan 2. So for this project, you're going to look only at the box labeled Emergent or Early Literacy, and it has activities that have to do with phonics and phonemic awareness and big books and many of the things that we've gone over this week and the things we'll cover in week 4. And then you'll choose a topic from that list only for your first lesson plan. When I introduce lesson plan 2, you'll choose a strategy or activity from the comprehension and vocabulary list, but we're not doing that yet. So stick with list 1 and make sure that you check that out in the presentation video for week 4. It's at the end. All right, good job in week 3. I'll see you back for week 4.